Hello and welcome further inside Chor Leoni. My name is Erick Light. I am the artistic director of that ensemble, and joining me today is composer, arranger, choral leader, guru, all-around amazing guy, deep sea diver, I believe, is Michael McGlynn. Welcome, Michael.
Well, except for the deep sea diver, you've most of that right. Hello, Erick.
Cold water diver?
I'm a cold water swimmer, though from where you are, cold water there is very different to cold water in the Irish Sea or in Iceland. It's very cold water there.
I'm going to allow you to be the expert on this and not me, if that's all right. I will let you tell me what is warm and what is cold, because I'm sure for both seas it would be horrible. Thank you so much for joining us today. You have had this just incredible choral career, and we could go on and on forever about it with your work with Anuna, your arranging, your composing. But what has really intrigues me, and I think is kind of the great fit for who we are as Chor Leoni, is this new-ish group that you've started with Manam. Can you tell us a little bit about its genesis and what it exists for?
Well, Manam, actually, a lot of what it is contained in the name itself, which is not one word, but two Irish words, mo, anam, and they're put together as manam, which means my soul. And for many years, although I've had huge success with my projects, including Anuna, all I've ever really wanted to do is be in a band. So I set up a band with a bunch of guys, and initially it was supposed to be all about Irish music, and it was all about many of the things I've explored in Anuna before. But then it took a very severe turn, a very strong turn away from that, and it became something very magical and very different, because now it really is about the exploration of not of masculinity. That's not really what it is, but it's about finding a perspective that men can express, and very much within the context of the singers mainly being from Ireland and Iceland, which is Ireland's younger, wilder, madder sister.
It's hearing you talk about the expressive possibilities for men, that hits really close to home with my work and our work with Chor Leoni. What do you think are the roadblocks there for men, and what are the I feel like as I work with men's voices, there can be some roadblocks as far as culturally, emotionally, but there's also a lot of amazing opportunities. How do you see those two working?
Well, I find it very difficult sometimes to express how I feel about choral music, because I came to the choral arts very late. I heard my first choir when I was 19. I sang in it the same year. So I come from the Beatles and the Sex Pistols and electronica. I come from classical music though too. So I might have David Bowie and then The Clash, and then I'd have Prélude à l'après-midi d'enfant by Debussy. And I never saw any distinction between musical styles. And I always felt when I came into choral music for the first time that it was all about defining genres and defining limitations for what people were capable of doing. And I really haven't got time for that. As far as I'm concerned, any choir or any group of people are a band. And more importantly, they're a community. And particularly for young men, that sense of community is something that's incredibly important in this world. It's changed so much since I was a young man that at least we were all crashing around not knowing what we were doing. But now there are so many, many more pressures on young men that this form, whatever you want to call it, is something that is really important. And I think that Manam is there to inspire that. It's the guys in Manam are all so diverse. Some of them are very brilliant choral musicians, but most of them are not. Most of them are musicians first and foremost. That's what they are. And it doesn't matter what music they do. They have life experiences that they want to express, and they express those together. And what they express together makes them stronger.
Wow. It is so evident to me in the singing and this project in particular, that what you're saying is actually really shining through. Sometimes that doesn't translate into the performances and the videos and all those sorts of things. But it's really wonderful to hear, and just know here in BC you have some brothers sharing a lot of those very same values. It's the sorts of things that we talk about all the time, and I sort of feel like if you can crack that nut of toxic masculinity, inside is this just beautiful egg waiting to turn into something gorgeous, a beautiful swan perhaps, but it is an amazing power once that, I think, is unleashed, and it's so great to see you doing this in what I think is a new and fresh way. I want to ask you a little bit about, because I think so many people know you from singing your music, and you have had a deep relationship with all kinds of music, as you were saying. But I think certainly Celtic folk music and folk music, as you're saying, Icelandic music with Manam, is a great part of that. When you're approaching as an arranger or composer and working with folk music or ancient music or anything that pre-exists in a time or a culture, what's your approach? How do you treat that that nugget of what's existed before you got involved?
That's a great question. I would say, in a very simple way, and the same way with everything. If it's very old, the aim is to not respect the original writer, but to try and take the intent of the original writer and make it evident today. So in other words, make it relevant. It doesn't matter how old a piece is. If we can, I remember when I started setting medieval Irish fragments for the first time, I got quite a lot of flack from classical musicians. They would say, you can't arrange that piece that way. And I was very despondent, because when I would do an Irish medieval piece from the 12th century that hadn't been sung for 800 years, I'd be bringing that writer into the presence of contemporary audiences and affecting them. And yet, when I spoke to academics about it, those people that went and picked up the manuscripts with the dust and the smell and the grime, they were very different. They said, it lives. And for them, despite the fact that it might not have been the most authentic way to set something, or the lack of snobbery was the issue. And I think in traditional music, it's the same. Anuna, for example, here in Ireland, it has no profile of any description, because what it does is it isn't folk music. And because when I approach the songs and the stories, I just approach them as songs and stories. I'm not really interested in being authentic. I do want to reach in, and if there's a beautiful melody there, I want people to be touched by that. But in our tradition, particularly in Ireland, it's not the melody is important, it's the story, because the transmission of text is really what's at the core of all Irish traditional music. And my primary subject is not music anyway, it was English literature. And that's where I came from. I think I became a composer when I was 45. It took me that long to say, I'm actually a composer. Because up until then, all I was doing was taking ideas and presenting them. I saw myself as an artist, but not as a composer. So I think that's incredibly restrictive. I think every artist should be multifaceted. And that's what I try and do with the arrangements. I try and make them so that anyone can approach them and anyone can understand a part of what the original intent of the song was.
I love that. That resonates so much with me. And when young people come to me and say, "Oh, I want to become a conductor. What should I do?" I'm like, read books, read poetry.
Yeah.
You know, it's not so much about 1, 2, 3, and 4 as it is about gaining experience and learning how to lead people and enriching yourself so that you're a worthwhile person to be up in front of other worthwhile people. I want to ask you though. Your arrangements, I think, live in a couple different ways, and I think lots of composers and arrangers go at traditional music, whether that's ancient sacred music or folk music or whatever, and two paths can sometimes diverge, with things being perhaps a bit, I would maybe say, undercomposed, or things that are sort of overcomposed, and where the arranger really gets out of the way of that melody and of that story and just lets it exist in a simple way, whereas some other arrangements can be a bit more of a handshake between the composer's sonic ideas and that nugget. And I think you've done you vacillate in your writing, I think, between those two areas. When do you decide to do what with
that is such a great question. Again, Eric, I love your questions, I have to say. We're talking about two things there. The first thing is that when I studied early English literature for the first time, and I came across medieval English lyrics, the way that lyrics work is the poem is at the center of a frame. So the poet will describe the natural world, and as you call it, a nugget. The story is hidden within the frame. So the frame attracts us in to that essence. And that's the basis for the way I would approach all traditional settings. In that, the melody and the song are at the center, and the aim of the arrangement is to bring you into that, not to frighten you and not to be clever. And the second thing is that most people think that I know you don't, but most people think a lot of my songs are arrangements. But I actually don't set very many pieces at all. I actually compose pieces which sound like traditional music. And the reason I do that is because at the core of Anuna in particular, there was no existing choral tradition in Ireland at all, none. We sang as a nation in our indigenous language with a single voice. So when I set up Anuna, I was shocked to realize that actually Ireland didn't have an indigenous tradition of choral music. So I had to create one. So therefore, a lot of my songs sound like arrangements, but they're actually freely formed. So you'll have songs like Dulamon, which of course is my mega hit. That's not an arrangement. It's an original piece. And it combines Bulgarian folk ideas and folk music with the concepts of Irish traditional music. And the scary part is that it has had an effect on traditional music. I'm not the only composer here that has done that, but it's multiple rhythms and cross rhythms and changes and things like that are imposed in our tradition. We don't have those.
Right.
So now we have. So you have loads of people doing clever stuff and all that, and they're saying, "Oh, that's traditional music." It's not.
Traditional Irish because it's from your Bulgarian, yeah.
And it has to change to survive. So therefore, that's really it's developing a form that is developing. I would like to be part of a school here. I'd like to be part of a series of arrangers and composers, but that actually hasn't happened at all. I've nobody following in my footsteps in this country, but I'm very happy to say I do in other countries. That's other people who kind of get this. And that really is very flattering.
That's just remarkable. And I hadn't considered this coming back around on you, that you're seeing your influence reflected back, and people just assuming, oh, this has just always been there. And isn't that probably the way of most music of how we think about it? I think that's just fascinating.
Yeah, but it can be problematical in that, people then make assumptions. I mean, at the core of what I do, I am an academic. And anything I do, I try and avoid that one word. And I think you mentioned it earlier, and that's the word clever. I don't like clever music. I never did. I like well thought out music, but I don't like music that is clever in itself. And an awful lot of choral music today is gestural and clever. And it just lacks that connection, which it needs to have power in it, it needs to have energy, and it needs to have that essence of, God, I really want to make this heard. And not just, I want people to listen to me. That's a problem today, of course. We're all complete selfish egotists.
And this internet thing is probably not helping much either in that regard. Yeah.
It's all a website now, Eric. You know, young composers are about, I've got the website. And they write to me and they say, what do you think of my website? And I go, I've only written 2 songs. You've only 2 songs. And you've a fantastic website. I have a video.
You're not even ready for Bandcamp. Jeez. Yeah.
I've only 1 song. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now, I want to play for everyone. We're going to play at the end of this the video for Deyr Fe, and that is, I think, just a remarkable piece of music. And if you could maybe just walk us through that work, and in the context of what we've just talked about, and your process, how you came to it, how Manam's a part of it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Yeah, Deyr Fe is a great. It's a great choice. Deyr Fe is it's an Icelandic text dating from the 10th century, and basically it says, "Cattle die, your family die, and you'll die." And really, all that matters in the end is that you're remembered for what a great guy you were. Right. And then we have this extraordinary soloist, Bjarni Gudmundsson, and he has this very, very strange and ethereal voice, which I wrote this piece for him. But we actually created it in the studio. I wrote down a couple of phrases, and then we went in and we kind of built the whole thing up together. And I think that really the aim of it is to take you on a journey, like a funeral procession. And in the video, I don't really need to explain too much about it, but Bjarni is symbolic of something that is often shied away from in contemporary work. Who wants to talk about death itself? And that's who he is.
Well, I think the work you're doing is remarkable. I think this piece is remarkable. I want to thank you so much for going a little bit deeper into what you do and your approach. I think it's so refreshing. The choral world could use a little bit more of this talk. And thank you again. We'll
you're a
yeah. And I'm glad all this technology worked. This is now, you can hear Michael's work with Manam, and this is Deyr Fe.